The following video was sponsored by the Greek American Heritage Society of Philadelphia, preserving and promoting our community's history.
Our guest today was born in Philadelphia, is a World War II veteran, and a founding member of St. Demetrios Church when it moved from 59th and Larchwood to its present-day location in Upper Darby. Welcome, Nickolas Jekogian.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
To say you've been a witness is an understatement. You are a centenarian, a person that's seen quite a bit of the Greek community's growth in and around the Philadelphia area. Let's talk a little bit about St. Demetrios first.
Well, when I returned from the service, of course it took a few years for me to get adjusted back into work. And then I joined a church in parish council. I was a member of the church about 1955. And I worked through there. Then about 1958, they gave me the assignment of taking care of the cemetery committee, which was handling all the church lots that were owned in Fernwood Cemetery. I was responsible for the sale and the record keeping of all the, where record keeping is where each person was buried in which grave. And I kept on that until 91, 1991. And I was on the board, I served on the parish council board from 55, as I said, all the way through to roughly 74, 75. But I still was on the cemetery committee until 1991. Of course, when I was on the building committee and we did all the work for the contractual work, the architect, the ideas, the thoughts, and I and a few others every night would walk over and see the progress of the church.
You mean you'd go from Larchwood over to Powell Lane to see?
In those days, once they start building, I lived in Upper Darby already.
Okay.
So I used to commute to 59th and Larchwood. But once the church began being built, I would walk over because I lived at Copley Road, 4 or 5 blocks away.
So you just crossed the bridge?
No, I'd walk down Chestnut or Walnut Street.
Oh, okay, that way, okay.
From Copley Road. And watch the progress. I was always interested in how it's going, what's going on. And if there were any questions, we would sit down, the board members, Father Ted, and discuss them. And if we could make improvements, we did. And it went well.
What did that neighborhood look like back then?
In those days, there was a big Irish group of people, but many Greek people had moved along. Wellington, Powell Lane, Marlborough, and Overhill. I forget the names now. I'd been gone for a while. And it was a big Greek community there, which was one of the reasons that we settled our church there.
So the Greeks were moving west constantly? They
were leaving West Philadelphia and moving into the Upper Darby or further out, Drexel Hill. And we even tried at one time to meet with people who were instrumental with St. Luke's. But we couldn't come to any real working agreement, so we went our separate ways.
Let me ask you this. When you were still at 59th and Larchwood, and you guys had come to the decision, what did you feel or think about the whole idea of moving to Upper Darby, the church?
We realized that West Philadelphia was changing. Many of our parishioners were moving to Upper Darby. A few did not move, but the majority did. We had a couple of people there, don't recall their names, were involved in real estate, and they said, West Philadelphia is changing. The whole part of West Philly, south of Market Street, is going to change. We recommend you move. And we listened. And we looked around. We decided on this place on Power Lane, drew up our plans, worked with Chergodis, I think, was the architect, who was also very active with the Archdiocese. He did many churches. And
well, St. Demetrios has a specific style to it, that church that was built, we noticed.
that church was a style that we liked. We had gone and looked at various others, and we liked the style of that church because Bethlehem, PA had the same style, and we liked it. And that's what we worked on.
Can you talk about the neighborhood around St. Demetrios? We know
The neighborhood on Copley Road, Wellington Road, and of course we were all much younger in those days, you know. Many of our kids grew up there. My sons grew up there. All went to the school which was right up on, what was the school name?
Cardington?
Cardington, correct.
At the playground, yeah, okay.
The playground now was Cardington School. They went there. Then from there they went to Upper Darby High. I think they went to Bywood.
Elementary too?
Beverly Hills, and then they went to Upper Darby.
Now, how long did you stay in Upper Darby?
We've stayed in Upper Darby from 50 until roughly 94. Wow. And we moved out of the city. But we moved back in 96, 97, because our roots were here. Our friends were here. Our church. You know, I still consider myself part of a St. Demetrios. I mean, you know, your whole blood and your whole life, all the work you've done for it was right there.
Let's back up and talk about your life growing up and where you were born. Give us a little family history about your ancestry first.
Okay, both my parents came from Platanore, Greece. I was the firstborn here. At that time, we lived in Center City, Philadelphia. And I was baptized in Evangelismos church when it was down on South 12th Street. But then when we moved in Center City, St. George, Philadelphia, which is now the Cathedral, was walking distance, so we went there. We attended Greek American school. In those days, you had 4 periods of schooling, 1 English, 1 Greek in the morning, took a break, and 1 Greek and 1 English in the afternoon.
That was at St. George Cathedral.
St. George, in those days it was not the cathedral, it was the St. George Church. And that's where I met my wife. We both got through the activities of the St. George Church, and then the choir, and then the usual thing happens, we got married.
What years are we talking about now?
We're talking late 30s. We got married in 1941 in St. George Church. And in those days I would be, how could I have been? 18, 15, high school years, you know.
Right.
I was a young kid.
Now, what were you doing then? You were about 18, 19, you got married a couple years later. Did you get married before you were a veteran?
I got married, and immediately afterwards war was declared, so.
Drafted or did you join?
No, I joined because I thought I'd get a better deal. It didn't work out that way. Well, I won't say it didn't work out that way, but I ended up in the infantry company, We trained all through Philadelphia, and then we went to Europe and were part of Patton's army.
Oh, you served under Patton?
Served under Patton's army.
Where did you serve? Can you give us a little?
We took, we've had 4 battles, the biggest being, of course, the Battle of the Bulge. We participated in that. Well, that was a real tough battle because that was one of the coldest and worst winters involved. And we were real cold. And then, of course, it was over and we came home.
What was that like for you to come home?
Wonderful. I couldn't wait. By then, I had a boy. I had a son I hadn't seen yet, so I was anxious to get back. And we left from Marseille, went back into Hoboken or whatever the shipyard was there, and home. I was very glad to be home. When I came back, my family, well, we moved into West Philadelphia.
So you left from Center City and came home. Your family was in West Philadelphia?
In West Philadelphia, 58th and Spruce. Actually, my wife was living with her mother at the time. And the first year we stayed there.
And she had your son while you were gone?
My son, Nick Jr., yeah.
He was born while you were gone?
While I was gone.
Where were you when that took place?
No, I don't remember. All I know is...
Did you get a call or something like that? Or how did you get word?
I got what they used to call V-mail. I got a letter 6 months later.
6 months after your son was born?
No, phone call? You're in a modern age. There were no phone calls in those days.
No text message.
No text. No text messages.
No Skype. So you found out about your son's birth 6 months after it occurred.
6 months after it occurred.
How did that make you feel?
Well, I was very happy. I had a boy. He was healthy. My wife was healthy. We were all happy.
All right, let's move forward now. You came back. Let's talk about the church some more. St. Demetrios in Westville.
When I came back, of course, I had to get settled. We moved into Upper Darby, found a home there, and I was still going to St. Demetrios in 59th and Larchwood. That's when all this talk of the Greeks were in Upper Darby, the majority of our parishioners were in Upper Darby, we should think about moving. We set up a committee, late 50s, and we looked at properties, decided on Upper Darby, did our negotiating. Not only I mean, we had our committee. And
how big was the committee?
The working group of the committee was 15. And we did a lot of the basic work. We did all the running around.
Was there another option that was being considered other than its current location?
Well, we looked at many locations up on City Line Avenue. As I mentioned, we discussed it with the people who were involved with St. Luke's, and we didn't reach any agreements there. So we went on our own. And we liked Upper Darby because Wellington Road, Marlborough, all these streets, and where the church is, was convenient for all the people there.
Right, the shopping district was there, the school.
The school. But not only that, you wanted the church near where people lived. So in those days, we didn't all have automobiles.
Accessibility.
And buses didn't run down in that particular street or that area. 69th Street and Marshall Road, yes. So if you were anywheres, you would ride the elevator and get off at 69th and Market or Millborough, and
they would walk the rest of the way?
And they would walk. But the majority of the people live between
69th Street and Powell Lane, I think is what you're talking about.
Yes, yes.
And you walked to church every day?
Well, whenever we went to walk to church, By then I had gotten a car, but it was easier to, well, we liked walking. I'm a walker. So it was no problem. We would walk to church. I think we had a very viable, very good church, very interested. A lot of people worked hard. Of course, I, being on the board, also served the committees. You know, we had our socials, we had our various group meetings, we had church meetings that many people attended and participated.
How about talking about one of your favorite either organization? How about a favorite celebration or moment that might have taken place that you remember?
Well, for me, I enjoyed the celebrations of the church, the holidays, like St. Nick's for me. St. Nick's, I always made St. Nick's. I always got my Holy Communion on St. Nick's. That was a must. No matter what day it was, I'd take off from work, I would go to church and get my Holy Communion and get my blessings and say my prayers. My whole family did too.
Easter, anything like?
I loved Easter. Easter to me is the most fascinating part of our services.
Did you celebrate out in, on the streets at all during the holidays? Did you do any Christmas?
Parade. We'd come out of the church, go up the road to Walnut Street, turn around and come back, and go back into the church. And at one time the police helped us by blocking off Marshall Lane to Walnut Street.
The festivals, do you remember the festivals?
I worked on the first festival.
What was that like?
Yeah. We had the parking lot in the back then. There used to be a home. We bought that out, leveled it, took out all the trees. And we had our first festival. What year was that?
Probably in the early 70s, middle 70s.
I can't remember the year, but I worked the first festival.
Well, what did you do at the festival?
Did everything.
Everything.
In those days, we as board members just pitched in where it was needed. So I spent some time cooking hamburgers and hot dogs, spent some time over at the other place. The woman always took the pastries and the cake and the coffee. And well, I'm trying to remember, we had music. And at those days, we used to get up and dance on the parking lot, the parishioners. Today you just see the young kids get up and dance in uniform. We didn't have that yet. That came later.
So you folks danced?
We got up and danced. Yes, because I remember many of my American friends we invite to come and get Greek food and everything.
Well, tell me about that. You when you say they came up and the parishioners would come up and dance Greek together?
Just like you would go to a social Greek dance.
Right, okay.
We'd get up and dance around the parking lot. Of course, we were young then, and we enjoyed doing the Greek dances. Now they don't do it.
Yeah, now it's done by the groups, the folk groups.
The kids do it, and they're in uniform, and it's beautiful. Yeah. But I miss not seeing the people get up and dance. They should.
They should. Now, when you were part of both locations, you were also a founding member of the famed Boy Scout Troop 302.
We had started the Boy Scout Troop when we were in 59th and Larchwood. Troop 302. 8 or 10 of us got together, discussed it, we thought it was a good idea. We got a hold of the Boy Scout people, they sent someone down, we talked it over, got inaugurated, got established.
Did you guys have meetings there in the church for the kids?
Every week we would have a meeting. They would come for a meeting, we'd meet in the church hall, and we'd teach the usual things that the Boy Scout in those days wanted to go. We would go out in the summer for a week to Treasure Island, and we would participate in all their activities. You should ask Bill about those things.
Did you stay with the organization, the Boy Scouts, when it moved to Upper Darby?
Yes, yes. We stayed there. We were active there for a while.
Let's talk about your family a little bit. You were married at St. George Cathedral.
Right.
And your two sons were born, or no, they were baptized?
No, my one boy, Stephen, that's his second son, was baptized at St. Demetrios Church, 59th and Larchwood.
Right.
We're going back to 1950. My son, Nickolas, got married in 66, 67, Upper Darby Church, St. Demetrios, Upper Darby. And then my other boy got married, but he had moved to North Jersey at Tenafly, St. John's at Tenafly. So both my children were married at Greek Orthodox Church.
But you stayed with the church through the 90s.
I stayed with St. Demetrios through the 90s. Then we moved out of the city for a while. We came back and moved into Broomall. And of course, St. Luke's was right up the street. I could walk to St. Luke's. Not that I walked, but...
So you were a member of that congregation as well?
I was a member of that congregation from 97, 98 until 2006 when we moved to Maris Grove here.
And the last 6, 7 years, have you been a church member of any of the...
I was shortly for St. Luke's, but it was too far to drive. So I went to St. George Media.
So, Evangelismos, St. Demetrios of Upper Darby, St. George in Philly.
St. George, then St. Demetrios.
St. George, St. Demetrios,
St. Luke,
and 5 parishes. You've been a member of 5 parishes.
5 parishes.
That's amazing.
I've been around.
Yeah, you certainly have.
I have been around.
And each one of them are different, I imagine.
Oh, yes. They're different. The people are a little different. And the priest has a lot to do with how the church operates and runs. And Father Chris is very good. Father George over here is, I think, very good. And we had some very good priests in the beginning. And I say, in the beginning, I don't know the new ones, so I won't judge what I don't know.
The fact that you've been a centenarian is fascinating, I think, to myself and to other people. You've been around since we've been an agricultural society and have gone to a technology society. What goes through your head when you reflect on this?
Very, very many things. I went back when the telephone, instead of asking for a number, you had to dial it. And the common thinking was nobody would remember all those numbers. But it happened. Now you have a little risk. You say, Joe, call John. And it happens. So we have moved a long, long way with technology, and it's good for the country.
What's the downside of it? Social skills?
Well, we've lost, I won't say social skills, but part of it is social. We've lost the ability to be in contact with people, to socialize with people, so talk, exchange ideas on not a business level, a social level. I think too many of us pick up a cell phone and text Joe down the street, how you doing today, or something like that. And like the old days, we used to call up and let's go somewhere, or let's do this. You don't see much of that anymore. At least that I know of. Of course, you know, now I've reached this stage, not many of my friends are around.
Let's go back to St. Demetrios again. When you hear the name St. Demetrios, what do you think of?
I consider St. Demetrios my home church. I worked very hard in that church. I was involved with the parish council for many years. I was deeply involved with the building committee. I got very involved with the cemetery committee, because now you're dealing with people you know. You have to handle, not handle their burial, but assign lots and do this. And it's home to me. St. Demetrios Church is, to me, my home church. And no matter where I go, that's my home church. I feel very warm about it.
Okay, and if you think back, is there something or someone, some moment, or something about St. Demetrios that makes it special, besides what we said, it's part of your past, but...
Well, so many nice things happened there. We had our scout troop. My boy got married in there. We had, many of my friends were married there. Their children were Christian, baptized in that church. I saw a lot of our early life for me and my people when we returned from the service happening in there. So it leaves me with that warm feeling of friendship and seeing my friends participate in that church. Some of them were also on the parish council.
Would you say this, or is there something else that has shaped, or has St. Demetrios actually shaped, how has St. Demetrios actually shaped or influenced your life?
Well, I believe that when you associate with people, you learn something. You learn how to talk with them, you learn different people, how they react, and you do your best to communicate with them so that you have a nice relationship. That's what I learned.
Nickolas Jekogian, thank you for speaking with us today, and we wish you good health.
Thank you very much.
For more information about sponsoring or viewing the interview series, visit the Greek American Heritage Society of Philadelphia online at gahsp.org.